Welcome to Bourbon Hunter Anonymous. Elmer T. Lee, the man, the myth, the single barrel legend. Let's be honest, if bourbon had a Hall of Fame, most of us would still be arguing about who gets in while paying way too much on the secondary market. Here, we chase whiskey, not hype, and occasionally question our life choices in liquor store parking lots. Tonight's episode is about a bottle that never asked to be famous, never needed fancy packaging, and somehow became one of the most hunted bourbons on the planet. No gimmicks, no finishing barrels named after planets. Just one man, one barrel, and a quiet confidence that said, yeah, this'll do. This is Elmer T. Lee, the reason single barrels exist, the reason your wallet cries, and the reason bourbon people say things like, you just don't understand it. So pour something neat, lower your expectations of finding one on a shelf, and let's talk about how a soft spoken distiller accidentally created a monster. So, who is Elmer T. Lee? Before bourbon hunting was a sport, before people camped outside liquor stores like it was Black Friday for grown-ups, there was Elmer T. Lee, a quiet, methodical Kentuckian who believed bourbon should be earned, not hyped. Elmer Thomas Lee was born in 1919 and joined what would become Buffalo Trace Distillery in 1949, fresh out of engineering school. At the time, bourbon wasn't glamorous. Vodka was rising, clear spirits were modern, and American whiskey was very much in its dad drinks in the basement era. Elmer didn't care. He believed bourbon's best days were still ahead, if someone was willing to slow down and respect the barrel. Lee worked his way up from chemical engineer to plant superintendent and eventually became master distiller in 1968. But his real gift wasn't management, it was his palate. Elmer had an uncanny ability to taste bourbon directly from the barrel and know exactly which barrels were special. Not good, not very good, exceptional. And here's where Elmer quietly changed bourbon history forever. In the early 1980s, Elmer noticed something most people ignored: barrel location mattered. Whiskey aged on certain floors of the warehouse, exposed to different temperatures and airflow, developed richer, more complex flavors. Instead of blending those standout barrels away into a larger batch, the standard practice at the time, Elmer asked a radical question: why not bottle the barrel by itself? That idea became Blanton's Single Barrel, released in 1984, the first commercially marketed single barrel bourbon. Today, that sounds obvious. Back then, it was borderline hearsay. Bourbon was supposed to be consistent, blended, predictable. Elmer believed individuality was a feature, not a flaw. Blanton's didn't just succeed, it created the premium bourbon category. Every single barrel release you see today traces its DNA back to Elmer T. Lee. After retiring in 1985, the distillery decided to honor the man who helped save bourbon from obscurity. In 1986, they released Elmer T. Lee Single Barrel Bourbon, a whiskey designed to reflect his personal taste: smooth, balanced, elegant, with spice that whispers instead of shouts. And this part matters. For years, Elmer himself selected the barrels for the bourbon that bore his name. If it didn't meet his standards, it didn't get bottled. Period. No marketing override, no shortcuts. Just an old school distiller trusting his senses. Elmer T. Lee wasn't flashy. He didn't chase trends. He didn't build hype. He believed bourbon should speak for itself, and that patience, oak, and craftsmanship would always win in the end. He passed away in 2013, but his fingerprints are still all over modern bourbon culture. Every allocated bottle, every warehouse tour guide explaining barrel selection, every bourbon hunter chasing that one special barrel. That's Elmer's legacy. Elmer T. Lee wasn't just a master distiller. He was the man who taught bourbon to believe in itself. Elmer T. Lee barrel bourbon didn't arrive with fireworks or fanfare. And honestly, that's very on brand for the man it honors. The bourbon first released 1 year after Elmer T. Lee retired from Buffalo Trace. This timing wasn't accidental. By then, By then, Elmer had already cemented his legacy with Blanton's and decades of quiet innovation behind the scenes. Creating a bourbon in his name wasn't about chasing sales, it was about capturing his philosophy in liquid form: balance over bravado, quality over quantity, and patience above all else. Unlike many tribute bottles that appear long after the fact, this one was created while Elmer was very much part of the distillery and culture. And for years, he personally selected the barrels. This wasn't a marketing exercise. It was Elmer saying, "Yes, I stand behind this." Elmer T. bourbon is made at Buffalo Trace Distillery, one of the most historically significant whiskey sites in the United States. The land itself has been used for distilling since the late 1700s, surviving floods, fires, prohibition, name changes, and shifting ownership, yet somehow never stopped making whiskey. By the time Elmer T. bourbon debuted, the distillery had already been known as George T. Stagg Distillery and later adopted the Buffalo Trace name. What matters is this: Elmer knew every inch of this place: the warehouses, the floors, the airflow, the barrels that aged better up high or closer to the Kentucky River. This bourbon is inseparable from the geography. You're not just tasting whiskey, you're tasting place. This bourbon exists for one simple reason: respect. It was created to honor Elmer T. Lee's decades of innovation and his quiet but massive role in reshaping modern bourbon. Without Elmer, single barrel bourbon might still be a niche idea. Premium bourbon might not exist as we know it. The idea that variation could be a virtue might never have caught on. Elmer T. Lee bourbon reflects his personal preference, not the loudest trends of the time. It was designed to be approachable, refined, and consistent within its own individuality. Think of it as a bourbon that doesn't shout, it leans in and lets you come closer. From day one, Elmer T. Lee bourbon has been exclusively single barrel. That means no blending to smooth out flaws, no averaging flavors across hundreds of barrels, no hiding mistakes. Each bottle comes from one specific barrel, aged in a specific spot, shaped by specific conditions. That's both bold and risky, because if a barrel isn't excellent, there's nowhere to hide. This is where the bourbon hunter analogy fits perfectly. Think of it like a lucky dip with standards. Every barrel is different. One might lean sweeter, another spicier, another more oak forward. But they're all selected to hit the flavor profile Elmer loved: smooth, balanced, elegant, quietly complex. No wild experiments, no gimmicks. Just honest bourbon doing what bourbon does best. The mash bill is Buffalo Trace's mash bill number 2, a high rye bourbon mash consisting of at least 51% corn, with rye and malted barley rounding it out. This gives more spice and complexity than lower rye bourbons. Still, Buffalo Trace is oversees their current master distiller as 2025 Harlan Wheatley. The distillery continues Lee's tradition, selecting barrels that match a flavor standard reflective of Elmer's taste. The proof and age, typically bottled at 90 proof, 45% ABV, with no age statement today, though many barrels run about that 8 to 10 plus year range historically. What's in the glass? Right out of the gate, or glass, Elmer T. Lee is approachable yet nuanced, perfect for seasoned hunters and newcomers alike. On the nose, it's vanilla and caramel sweetness, a hint of spice thanks to the rye, mulling spices, and orchard fruit vibes, a little oak warmth in the background. Palate, balanced sweetness, caramel, vanilla, maybe a touch of bubblegum. Rye spice mingling with red fruit or baked apple pie notes. Smooth and somewhat light mouthfeel that's more inviting than slamming down your throat. Its finish, medium and warm. Sweet caramel, spice lingering. A hint of oak that makes you just want one more sip. Fans describe it as spicy and rich, with cinnamon and caramel dancing on the finish. And a bourbon full of wax dipped necks, laser etched glass, oversized corks, and labels that look like they were designed by a tattoo artist on their third espresso. Elmer T. Lee's bottle quietly clears its throat and lets everyone else finish talking. And that's exactly the point. The Elmer T. Lee bottle is classic, restrained, and unapologetically traditional, much like the man himself. The shape is solid, square shouldered, giving it a grounded, almost architectural feel. It looks less like it wants attention and more like it expects respect. This is not a bottle that screams from the shelf. It waits. The glass is clear and clean, intentionally showcasing the bourbon's rich amber color. No tinted glass, no smoke, no distractions. It's a visual reminder that if the whiskey is good enough, you don't need tricks to hide behind. The label design is minimal and dignified, simple typography, straightforward layout, no exaggerated tasting notes, no origin story written in 8 fonts, no buzzwords, just the essentials, the name, Elmer T. Lee, the designation, single barrel, the proof, and the quiet implication that you already know what this is, or you're about to learn. It honors the man, not the marketing department. Topping it all off is a simple black cap, which for some reason is surprising, even controversial. But once again, it fits a philosophy. Elmer T. Lee cared about what was in the bottle, not how dramatic the pop sounded when you opened it. No wax seal to fight, no synthetic cork to crumble, just twist, pour, and pay attention. It's the whiskey equivalent of showing up in a tailored suit with no tie, understated, intentional, and confident. Over the years, Buffalo Trace has released limited commemorative editions, including the bottles honoring Elmer T. Lee's 100th birthday and other milestone tributes. These versions often feature subtle label or packaging variations and send collectors into a frenzy faster than a whispered rumor of a delivery truck. But here's the thing, even with special editions, the soul of the bottle never changes. The design never strays far from its roots. No glow ups, no rebrands, no desperate attempts to look modern because it doesn't need to. The Elmer T. Lee bottle communicates something rare in today's whiskey world. If you know, you know. It's not here to impress Instagram. It's here to reward the poor. It reflects Elmer's belief that bourbon should be honest, well made, and quietly excellent. In short, this bottle doesn't chase trends, it outlasts them. And just like the whiskey inside, its power is in the restraint. Elmer T. Lee has become something bigger than bourbon. It's a measuring stick. For many drinkers, it marks the moment they realize bourbon can be elegant without being fragile, complex without being aggressive, and collectible without losing its soul. That reputation didn't happen overnight. It grew quietly, bottle by bottle, sip by sip, until one day people recognized the shelves were empty and the chase had begun. Today, finding LRT Lee in the wild feels less like shopping and more like tracking folklore. It's the bottle whispered about by store clerks, spotted briefly behind counters, or rumored to have arrived last Tuesday, maybe. You don't stumble into it, you earn it through timing, relationships, and more than a little luck. Some hunters swear by small town stores. Others rely on road trips, dusty shelves, or that one friend who knows a guy. The scarcity has turned the bourbon community into storytellers. Everyone has their Elmer T. Lee tale. The bottle found while killing time on a work trip. The surprise pour at a friend's house. The one that got away by 5 minutes. And that's where the legacy lives now, not just in the whiskey, but in the shared experience of the hunt. What's remarkable is that despite the hype, Elmer T. Lee hasn't become a gimmick. It hasn't morphed into something louder or more extreme to match demand. It remains what it has always been, a benchmark bourbon that reminds people why they started drinking bourbon in the first place. Not to flex, not to flip, but to slow down and pay attention. And if Elmer were here today, watching people chase his namesake across state lines and price lists, you can almost picture the smile. Not a grin, just a quiet, knowing smirk. He'd probably tell you not to overthink it. Pour it straight. Let it breathe. Take your time. Because the real reward isn't finding the bottle, it's opening it. Elmer T. Lee stands out not because it tries to be extraordinary, but because it never stopped being authentic. In a category increasingly crowded with limited releases, experimental finishes, and bottles designed to shock, this bourbon holds its ground by doing one thing exceptionally well, delivering a thoughtful, well composed experience that respects tradition without feeling dated. What truly elevates it is its intent behind it. This isn't a whiskey created by a committee or trend analysis. It reflects a clear point of view, one rooted in patience, balance, and confidence in the fundamentals. Every pour feels deliberate, as though someone asked, "Is this good enough?" and refused to move forward until the answer was yes. The single barrel nature gives its personality without chaos. There's individuality, but always within a recognizable frame. The kind of consistency that comes from being restraint rather than in control. It's a bourbon that rewards attention but doesn't demand reverence. You can analyze it or you can simply enjoy it. And then there's the hunt. Not the frantic, clout driven chase, but the quiet satisfaction of finding something meaningful in a world of noise. Elmer T. Lee isn't special because it's hard to find. It's hard to find because over time, people recognize its value. This is a bourbon for people who care about why something exists, not just how rare it is, a bottle that connects past to present and reminds us that some of the best things in whiskey were never meant to be rushed. Here's the thing about Elmer T. Lee: if you hate hype, you'll hate what it's become. If you love good bourbon, you'll understand why it happened. This bottle didn't get chased because it was rare. It became rare because people kept opening it and wanting another. No fireworks, no flex, just a reminder that sometimes the best bourbon doesn't punch you in the face. It taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, pay attention." So if you find one, don't post it, don't hoard it, definitely don't tell yourself you're saving it for a special occasion. That special occasion is called today. Because in the end, the hunt isn't about winning, it's about the pouring. Until next time, keep hunting, stay skeptical, and remember, if someone says they paid MSRP, they're probably lying. This is Bourbon Hunter Anonymous. And that's another pour down. If you enjoyed hanging out in the hunt today, don't leave me standing here like an empty bottle on a Sunday morning. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment about what I should track down next. Remember, bourbon may age gracefully, but my YouTube channel only grows if you feed it. I'll see you in the next hunt. Cheers, Bourbon Hunters.